Before the next episode of Pop Culture Exposé, where we break down the history of celebrity gossip and lines, get to know a little bit more about the OGs of the gossip game, starting with Walter Winchell.
It's time, America. Time for Walter Winchell.
All right, let's get into the man who practically invented gossip as we know it, and that is Walter Winchell. This guy didn't just write the news, he made it. And he did it with style and flair that no one matched since. Born in New York City in 1897, Walter Winchell was the original hustler. He got his start in showbiz as a vaudeville performer. Can you believe it? And if you remember back to my Pop Culture Exposé, episode 1, you covered that time period. But it wasn't long before he traded the stage for the typewriter. And that's where he truly found his calling. Now, when I say he was the king of gossip, I mean he practically built the castle.
A tabloid columnist turned broadcaster, by the 1950s, Winchell was a regular on TV.
Mr. and Mrs. North and South American, all the ships at sea, let's go to press. Washington, D.C.
With his staccato delivery, that telegraph sound, and a trademark hat, Walter Winchell mixed breaking news
Near Royce City, Texas, between San Antonio and St. Louis. Several reported killed. Just happened. We may have more on it later. Next is Arthur Godfrey.
with celebrity gossip.
Jack, Dragnet.
Hustle. In an age when people didn't talk openly about celebrities' private lives, Winchell was out here spilling tea like it was his job, because it was his job. And oh, he did it with style. Winchell's big break came in the 1920s when he started writing a column for the New York Evening Graphic, a tabloid that was a little, let's say, on the racy side. But Winchell wasn't one to be modest. He wrote in his fast, punchy style that was almost like a jazz riff, sharp, unexpected, and oh so entertaining. He understood that gossip wasn't just about spreading rumors, it was about showmanship. His column became a hit, and soon enough, Winchell was the guy everyone in New York was talking about. Imagine him sitting in his favorite booth at the storefront, dressed to the nines, holding court as the city's elite buzzed around him. But Winchell wasn't just there to party, he was there to listen. He soaked up every whispered rumor, every slip of the tongue, and transformed them into juicy little tidbits that kept his readers coming back for more.
Starting in 1959, Winchell served as narrator for the television classic The Untouchables.
On hand to watch the mobster leave was Elliot Ness, chief of the unique federal squad known as the Untouchables.
And his popularity grew. Winchell realized that gossip could be more than just entertainment. He had the power to shape reputations, and he used it. By the 1930s, he was writing for the Daily Mirror and had his own national radio show reaching 50 million listeners a week. Totally epic for that time period. Think about that. He had a platform so big, he could influence public opinion on a massive scale, and he did that. He called out politicians, mobsters, and movie stars alike.
Flanked by swastika flags and American flags.
Winchell cannot allow the event to go unnoticed by the American people.
In every corner of the land, America was nauseated. The American press unanimously condemned it as the vilest sacrilege ever perpetrated in the name of American freedom.
As Hitler's forces occupied Paris and threatened to invade Britain, public sentiment in America remains strongly against intervening. The America First Committee, founded as a student anti-war movement, takes a dark turn when Charles Lindbergh becomes its spokesman. While most of the country reveres the heroic aviator, when Lindbergh praises Germany and is given a medal by the Nazis, Winchell is quick to go on the attack.
Lindbergh made a speech in Des Moines Thursday night, an unmistakable appeal to anti-Semitism.
We cannot allow the natural passions and prejudices.
Lindbergh asks his audience, who's leading us to war? It's the Jews.
The British, the Jewish, or the administration.
And then he slips into some of the worst anti-Semitic tropes. And why are we getting this message to go to war? Where are we getting it from? Well, we're getting it from the media. And don't the Jews control the media? What he's saying, Jews aren't Americans. Our government, our press. The Jews are not part of our.
In December 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor puts an end to all debate about intervention. Winchell feels vindicated.
The importance of the Japanese attack is that war between the U.S. and Hitler is imminent. This will mobilize the efforts of the whole American people.
In his good graces, well, you were golden, but cross him and you'd find yourself on the receiving end of a very public takedown. Winchell had no problem dishing out insults and innuendos if he felt someone deserved it. This wasn't just gossip, it was power. Winchell understood that he could make or break someone's career with a single line. He loved every second of it. Now, Winchell wasn't just known for what he said, it was how he said it. He had this rapid-fire delivery that was as sharp as it was unforgettable, and he created his own vocabulary, coining phrases like the Big Apple for New York, or calling corrupt politicians rats in the cellar. His language was catchy, almost addictive, and it pulled people in. Imagine him on the radio saying something like, a certain Broadway starlet has developed a taste for gin and gentlemen. Who wouldn't want to know who he was talking about? Winchell's words painted pictures, and he knew just how to tease the audience enough, without giving them the whole story. That was his magic. You give just enough to keep your viewers and listeners guessing, to keep them coming back.
Attention, Mr. and Mrs. United States. I have just seen Wilson. This remarkable technical emotion picture is another achievement for 20th Century Fox. It is the high mark in the brilliant career of Darryl F. Zanuck. It is packed with entertainment from start to finish. You will feel the thrilling rhythm of the national anthem with every beat of your heart. Don't miss Wilson.
Winchell wasn't just about the elites. He was a part of their world. He had connections everywhere, from mobsters like Al Capone to Hollywood stars and even presidents. He was friends with Franklin D. Roosevelt, who saw Winchell as a tool to spread messages to the masses, and Winchell loved it. He was the man with the scoop, the guy with the tie-in. But as much as he had friends, he had enemies. Winchell was known for his brutal feuds. He famously went after the comedian Milton Berle, calling him out in his column and essentially putting him on blast for the whole country to see. Winchell didn't just report on Hollywood, he practically ruled it with an iron fist.
In 1932, a child is kidnapped and murdered. He's the 20-month-old son of Charles Lindbergh, an American hero for being the first man to fly solo across the Atlantic. 2 years later, Bruno Hauptmann is arrested for the crime.
This is the trial of the century, and any byline in America wants to be there. Winchell showed up every day at the courthouse with his typewriter, pounding out thousands of words a day of copy, and Winchell stayed out through the whole trial, weeks of this. He believed that this was a way to demonstrate that he was a serious reporter.
Winchell doesn't just take a reporter's byline, he becomes the headline. In doing so, he pioneers the blending of news and entertainment.
From Row A, Seat 5, Flemington Courthouse, January 17th. Witnesses confirmed this writer's contention at the time. The money was allegedly spent by Bruno on September 15th, 1934 in the morning.
He understood that people wanted novelty, that fact was irrelevant, really.
He uses his access to power to file sensational exclusives.
Winchell is talking to the prosecutor, who he dines with most evenings. So he's reporting not just the details of the trial, but he's giving you the kind of local color that only Walter Winchell can give you.
That spellbinding 40 minutes late Friday afternoon will never be forgotten by those of us who were there. It was the fury and the fire of the prosecutor who, it seemed to most of us, was representing civilization.
The verdict was guilty.
For Winchell, the verdict is in. He's a legitimate journalist.
Oh, that's another big one for me.
If
Come on.
someone crossed him, he wasn't just mad. He'd write about it publicly. It was all a part of his mystique, the blend of power and revenge that made him both respected and feared. Now, Winchell wasn't just spilling tea about celebrities. He was also deeply involved in politics, as mentioned. In 1940s and 1950s, he became one of the loudest voices against communism, supporting Senator Joseph McCarthy's witch hunts. He used his column to accuse people of being communist sympathizers. And let's just say he wasn't exactly delicate about it. Winchell saw the world in black and white, and he wasn't afraid to use his influence to push his agenda. But this stance began to isolate him. People once admired him started to see him as too extreme, too willing to ruin lives without evidence. His influence began to wane, and by the late 1950s, Winchell's reputation was suffering. The public was moving on, and his hard-line tactics no longer seemed so appealing. By the time television, though, became a dominant medium, Winchell's influence had largely faded. The new generations of Americans wanted something fresh, something that didn't feel quite as ruthless. Winchell's brash style, once groundbreaking, felt out of touch. The gossip world was evolving and it was leaving him behind. He tried to stay relevant, even moving to Las Vegas at one point to keep his career alive, but the magic was gone. Winchell's power had been rooted in his control over newspapers and radio. As media shifted, he couldn't keep up. His last years were lonely, and he died in a relatively obscurity in 1972, a shadow of the man who had once commanded America's attention with a single sentence. But despite the tragic ends, Walter Winchell's legacy is undeniable. He created the blueprint for modern gossip, showing the world that secrets, scandals, and mysteries could captivate millions. His influence is still seen today every time a columnist hints at a celebrity romance or a blogger posts a blind item. Winchell showed that gossip wasn't just idle chatter. It was power, control, and influence, all wrapped up in clever words and a bit of mystery. So the next time you read a blind item or hear a juicy piece of gossip, remember that it all started with a New York kid who understood that information was power. Walter Winchell may be gone, but his shadow still looms over every whisper, every rumor, and every story waiting to be told.
Next up in the Hollywood OG legend world is none other than Luella Parsons, the First Lady of Hollywood.
All right, everyone, get ready to meet the original Queen of Gossip, none other than Luella Parsons. If Walter Winchell was brash king of scandal, then Luella was Hollywood's shrewd, charming monarch, ruling gossip world with a velvet glove and an iron fist. Born in 1881 in Freeport, Illinois, Luella wasn't raised in the glitz and glamour of Tinseltown, but you never know it by the way she ran Hollywood. Luella started as a small-town girl with big dreams, and by the 1920s, she carved out a niche that would make her one of the most powerful women in the industry. While others chased headlines, Luella cultivated friendships and built a network that gave her an unmatched insider's view of Hollywood secrets. So let's dive into the life and legacy of Luella Parsons, the woman who showed the world that gossip could be an art and a business. Luella's career started in journalism, but her journey into gossip wasn't instant. She began as a movie critic for the Chicago Record-Herald, where she reviewed silent films and made a name for herself as someone who really understood the industry. She wasn't just about watching movies, she was about understanding the people who made them, the studio dynamics and the personalities behind the scenes. Her big break in 1923 when she moved to Hollywood and was hired by William Randolph Hearst, one of the most powerful media moguls of the time. Hearst saw potential in Luella, not just as a critic, but as someone who could sell the stories behind the stars. He gave her a syndicated column, and before long, she was the voice of Hollywood gossip, with readers all over the country hanging on her every word. Luella's secret weapon? Relationships. She didn't rely on bribes or sneaking around for information. No, Luella understood that if you wanted real dirt, you had to make friends. She charmed her way into Hollywood's inner circle, befriending actors, directors, and studio heads alike. Luella made stars feel comfortable, like she was their confidant, someone who they could trust, even with their darkest secrets. But make no mistake, she wasn't just their friend. Luella was shrewd, using her connections to build a network of informants who kept her in the loop. She did personal phone calls from directors, tips from studio execs, and whispers from stars who wanted her on their side. Luella knew how to balance friendship with power, and it worked. If she was loyal to you, she would protect you from scandal. But if you crossed her, that was another story. Luella wasn't just gossip. She was practically a fixer for Hollywood studios. If a star was involved in a scandal, Luella could help shape the story in a way that protected the star's image, or she could have the story completely buried. Studios understood her influence, and they knew that keeping Luella happy was often the difference between a movie's success or failure. For example, when Clark Gable fathered a child out of wedlock with actress Loretta Young, Luella was one of the few who knew the truth. She kept quiet to protect Gable's career, and in return, she had the loyalty of MGM, one of the biggest studios in Hollywood. Luella understood that sometimes silence was more valuable than words. She used her column not just to expose secrets, but to control them, to decide which rumors would see the light of day and which would stay hidden. But Luella's reign wasn't without drama. Enter Hedda Hopper, a former actress turned gossip columnist who became Luella's biggest rival. where Luella was diplomatic and strategic. Hedda was aggressive and fearless. They were like fire and ice, and Hollywood knew it. Their rivalry became legendary, with each columnist constantly trying to outscoop the other, and sometimes it got personal. Luella was furious when Hedda started landing big stories and wasn't afraid to use her connections to shut down her rival. For example, Luella once convinced a studio head to ban Hedda from the set of a major movie, but Hedda wouldn't back down, and their feud began a battle for control over Hollywood's secrets. Each woman had their network of informants, and the two constantly raced to see who could spill the juiciest line or break the biggest story. Their feud wasn't just about gossip, it was about power, and Hollywood was their battlegrounds. Now, let's talk though about the stars Luella made and the ones she broke. Luella was fiercely loyal to the actors she liked, and she used her column to build up their reputations. If she loved you, she'd make sure you were portrayed in the best possible light, but if she didn't, well, things could get ugly. Luella adored stars like Cary Grant, who she described as Hollywood's most charming gentleman, and she helped turn him into a household name. But then when it came to people like Orson Welles, things were a little different. She famously clashed with Welles over his film Citizen Kane, which was rumored to be based on her boss, William Randolph Hearst. Luella took it as a personal attack, and she used her column to slam Welles and his film, doing everything she could to damage his reputation. Her influence was so strong that Citizen Kane, now considered a masterpiece, actually struggled at the box office. Luella wasn't just a columnist, she was a force that could shape public opinion, and she knew it. Luella continued her reign for decades, outlasting many of the stars she wrote about. She wasn't just a gossip columnist. She was Hollywood's first power broker, controlling stories, protecting reputations, and, at times, wielding her column like a weapon. By the time she retired in the 1960s, she'd seen Hollywood change in ways that no one could have ever imagined, and she was there every step of the way, chronicling its highs and lows. Luella showed the world that gossip wasn't just idle chatter. It was a tool that, when used correctly, could make people and destroy them. She understood Hollywood's hunger for mystery, for scandal, and she fed it. One blind item at a time, she made gossip mainstream, and in many ways, she set the stage for every gossip column, tabloid, and blog that followed. Luella retired from gossip in the late 60s, leaving behind a legacy that shaped Hollywood. Her final years were quieter, and though she passed away in 1972, her impact never faded. Louella Parsons taught Hollywood how to use gossip strategically, how to keep secrets in plain sight, and how to turn the messy world of celebrity into something people had to read about. So next time you see a blind item or a headline that makes you wonder, think of Luella. She was the original queen of Hollywood secrets, the woman who made gossip more than just a story. It was her kingdom, and she ruled it with charm, cunning, and a whole lot of power.
As we conclude on the OG legends of the gossip world, let's dive into the legendary Hedda Hopper, the Queen of Quickies.
All right, we are diving into Hedda Hopper, the woman that put the fear in Hollywood and in their biggest stars. If Luella Parsons was the friendly gossip queen, Hedda was her fiery, no-nonsense counterpart. Known for her flamboyant hats and her ruthless approach, Hedda didn't play nice, and she didn't care who she offended. Born Elda Furry in a small town in Pennsylvania in 1885, Hedda didn't exactly come from Hollywood royalty, but from the moment she set foot in Los Angeles, she had one mission: to be the voice of Hollywood gossip, and she'd do whatever it takes to get there. So let's get into the life and legacy of Hedda Hopper, the gossip columnist who wasn't afraid to burn a few bridges and make some serious enemies along the way. Before she became a gossip queen, Hedda actually started as an actress. She moved to Hollywood in the 1910s and landed a few roles, often playing upper-class women and socialites.
And for him. What is this?
Mother's first picture, The Battle of Hearts, made with Mr. Farnham just 26 years ago.
That isn't actually Hedda, is it? Boy, get a load of that hat.
Never mind the hat. Look at the way she handles that gun.
Oh, brother, is that corny? Careful, Mother's very sensitive. She thinks she's good.
Well, she was. In those days.
But let's be clear. Hedda's true calling wasn't acting, and by the 1930s, late 1930s, her career had started to slow down, and she had realized if she wanted to stay relevant, she'd have to reinvent herself. Enter Luella Parsons, her soon-to-be rival and reigning queen of gossip at the time. Seeing Luella's success inspired Hedda to switch gears and jump into gossip herself. With her fierce personality, Hedda quickly became a name as someone who didn't play by the rules. She joined the Los Angeles Times as a columnist, and from that point, Hollywood would never be the same. Hedda Hopper's had a style all on her own and subtly not her thing. While Luella was diplomatic, Hedda was direct, unfiltered, and fearless. Her blinds didn't beat around the bush. She'd say things like, "A certain handsome heartthrob has been seen in some rather scandalous company," or "A leading lady with a famous temper better watch her step." People knew who she was talking about, and she didn't care if it ruffled feathers. In fact, Hedda loved a good scandal, and if she could stir the pot, well, she would. Hedda's column was bold, brash, and unpredictable. She exposed affairs, hinted at double lives, and sometimes she even went after celebrities' political beliefs. Nothing was off limits. To Hedda, gossip wasn't just about spilling tea, it was about power. She loved the thrill of having Hollywood's biggest stars terrified of her next move.
Hedda Hopper.
How do you...
Your mother's told me so much about you two. You know, I do wish I could stay and chat, but I was due at a party downstairs an hour ago.
Wondering if they'd be her next targets. And then, of course, we have to talk about her rivalry with Louella Parsons. This wasn't just a professional competition. This was a full-blown feud. Hedda saw herself as Luella's equal, but she wanted more than that. She wanted to outdo her, to prove she could be tougher, bolder, and dig up even juicier secrets. The two of them had very different approaches. Luella had her connections with studio heads and kept things polished, but Hedda, she wanted the dirt straight from the source, and she wasn't afraid to step on toes to get it. She often undercut Louella's stories or scooped her with bigger, bolder headlines. Hollywood had never seen anything like it, and people couldn't get enough of the drama between these two women. It was as if the columns themselves were locked in high-stakes competition, each trying to prove who had the real power over Hollywood's secrets. Let's talk about the fear factor, though, because if there's one thing Hedda Hopper was known for, it was intimidation. Stars were absolutely terrified of her. She had this way of letting them know that she could make or break their careers with just a few lines in her column. If she liked you, she'd make you a star, but if you crossed her, she would destroy you. One of Hedda's most famous lines hinted at an actor's double life, which sent shockwaves through Hollywood. She knew about the secrets most people wouldn't dare speak about, especially in that era. Stars knew if Hedda found out about something they wanted to keep hidden, there was a good chance it would end up in her column for the whole world to see. And it wasn't just actor. Hedda would go for anyone. Producers, directors, even studio heads were not safe from her reach. She relished that power, that ability to shape Hollywood's narrative and control what was in or out of public's favor. But Hedda wasn't just interested in Hollywood's gossip. She also had strong political beliefs, which made her even more controversial. She was an ultra-conservative and fiercely anti-communist. And during the Red Scare of the 1950s, she used her column to fuel Hollywood's fear of communism. Hedda would call out stars she suspected of being Red sympathizers, throwing around accusations that could end careers in an instant. Her column became a weapon in Hollywood's anti-communist crusade. People were scared and Hedda knew it. She would hint at stars' political affirmations, even if there was no real evidence. It was a dangerous time, and Hedda took advantage of that climate to cement her control over Hollywood. If someone she didn't like had even the faintest whiff of communist ties, she called them out, putting them at risk of being blacklisted. This side of Hedda was ruthless, and it made her both fear and hated. In many ways, she used her column to create an atmosphere of suspicion and paranoia, which left a lasting impact on Hollywood. Now, let's not forget one of Hedda's most memorable trademarks, her hats. She wore these big flamboyant hats that became part of her signature look. It wasn't just fashion, it was a statement. Hedda wanted to be seen to stand out, and her hats were just another way to remind people that she was a force to be reckoned with. People in Hollywood couldn't forget her, and she made sure of it. Her hats became so famous that when people talked about her, they didn't even have to say her name. Oh, you know, the lady with the hats? She loved her larger-than-life persona, and it became a part of her legacy. It was a visual reminder that she wasn't like anyone else in the gossip game. She was Hedda Hopper, and she was here to stay. By then,
this is a story of my town. There's no town like it on the face of the earth, because its business is make-believe. And for over 50 years, the people in this town have been getting up and going to work to tell the world a story. Down in that valley, some of them are busy crowning an emperor, and others are fighting the Civil War again. Somewhere else, a band of cattle thieves are shooting it out with the sheriff's posse. And two people who only met this morning are being married in front of an army of cameramen and crew. For this is Hollywood. You know, I've lived in this town for many years. I've acted in it, and I've written about it for 21 years. I've seen spectacular changes, because everything Hollywood does is spectacular. So are its people, and they're part of this story. But no story has ever come out of Hollywood as spectacular as the change going on right now to its work, to its homes, to its people, and you wouldn't have to go far to find it.
By the 1960s, Hedda's influence began to fade. Hollywood was changing and the industry became less tolerant of her hard-line conservatism and her ruthless style. Younger audience weren't as interested in her brand of cutthroat gossip, and the world of Hollywood gossip was evolving. Hedda continued to write her column until her death in 1966, but her last years were quieter, with her influence waning as the younger, bolder Hollywood stars emerged. In her time, though, Hedda had made her mark on Hollywood, creating an atmosphere of fear, excitement, and intrigue that has never truly disappeared. She was the original Hollywood terror, the woman who held the biggest names in the industry in the palm of her hands, all because she knew how to wield gossip as a weapon. So what did Hedda Hopper leave behind? She left a legacy of fearless, unapologetic gossip and a reminder that Hollywood secrets come with a price. How to show the world that gossip could be more than whispers. It could be a power play, a tool for control. Her rivalry with Louella Parsons, her political crusade, her larger-than-life personality, they all shaped Hollywood's golden age of gossip and set stage for the tabloid culture we know today. Hedda may be gone, but her bold, brash style she brought to Hollywood gossip is still very much alive. Whenever you see a juicy line or headline that pulls no punches, we can thank Hedda Hopper, the woman who showed that Hollywood sometimes the biggest drama happens behind the scenes.
Tune into the buzz, it's the talk of the day. From Bravo shows to the latest celeb spree, we've got the tea, come sip it with me. Dani Gossip Girl, Pop Culture Exposé.